You sit down to work and suddenly remember that you urgently need to check your phone, the kettle, and probably your entire life. 2 minutes later you are somewhere between memes, cats, and the idea that tomorrow will be the real productive day. Spoiler, most of the time this is not laziness, but the brain doing what it loves most, chasing quick and easy rewards. Simple solutions, clear explanations, and only what actually works. This is the Life by Science channel. In a large review, psychologist Pierre Steele showed that procrastination especially loves tasks with delayed rewards, unpleasant starts, and foggy first steps. In plain language, the brain is not excited about jobs that demand effort now and promise a vague payoff later. That is why a person can reply to 10 funny messages with ease and still spend 3 days emotionally preparing to open one important file. Not because they are stupid or weak, but because the task looks expensive to the brain and comes with no visible bonus. And that is good news, because if the problem is in the task design rather than your personality, it can actually be fixed. Dopamine is often called the pleasure chemical, but in daily life it is more useful to think of it as a reward expectation system. When the brain senses that something new, funny, tasty, or socially rewarding might happen, it lights up almost instantly. That is why a phone notification sounds like a tiny casino to the brain. Maybe there is something important, amusing, or rewarding just for you. A big project cannot compete that way, because it honestly says work first, and maybe later you will feel accomplished. In that battle, the phone starts with a huge advantage unless you deliberately change the rules. The phone is powerful not because it is evil, but because the road to reward there is absurdly short. One tap and you already get news, a like, a joke, a message, or simply a tiny shot of novelty. In one study, even choosing a phone as your break activity made it harder to return smoothly to the main task. Work and study cannot compete at that speed, because they demand that you sit down, focus, and survive the boring opening stretch first. That is why distraction is easier to beat, not with dramatic self-talk, but by reducing temptation and lowering the entry cost of useful work. One of the best tools has nothing to do with willpower and everything to do with formatting the task before the start. The phrase "write the report" sounds like gray fog to the brain, while "open the file, list 3 points, and find one table" already sounds survivable. The less uncertainty there is, the less resistance you feel, because the brain does not have to guess where to spend energy. Sometimes productivity comes back not after a motivational slap, but after 3 calm minutes of situ. Name step 1, open what you need, close what you do not, and suddenly the task no longer looks like the end of the world. A very strong tool from behavioral psychology, sounds almost comically simple. Do not promise yourself that you will work on it someday. Decide in advance exactly when the task starts. For example, if I finish dinner, then I set a timer and spend 10 minutes on the work file. That kind of plan sharply reduces internal bargaining of the maybe later or tomorrow I will become a new and improved version of myself variety. Research on implementation intentions shows that linking a cue to an action in advance significantly increases the odds that you will actually begin. People love the 5-minute rule not because it is magical, but because it dramatically lowers the price of starting. The brain does not need to agree to a heroic mission, it only needs to agree to spend a tiny bit of time with the task and forget perfection. Very often momentum kicks in after a few minutes, and continuing becomes easier than returning to another episode of guilt and procrastination. This works for study, exercise, cleaning, and even unpleasant emails. Put on the shoes, open the file, take out one bag, read one paragraph, and suddenly the brain has already been tricked into motion. There is a very practical rule: the useful action must be easier than the useless one, or the brain will choose easy nonsense. If the phone is next to you, the feed is already open, and the work file is hidden in folder jungle, willpower loses before the start. But if the right document is open, notifications are off, and the workspace does not look like an archaeological dig, the brain gets a very different script. It sees not chows, but a clear route: sit down, open, begin. Sometimes the whole difference between a productive evening and a 3-hour swim through memes is simply that the phone is in another room. Sometimes what we call laziness is just ordinary fatigue with terrible branding. When you do not sleep enough, the brain struggles more to hold goals, inhibit impulses, and tolerate the boring stretch before reward. That is why after a bad night even a simple task can feel like someone asked you to move a wardrobe alone. Sleep loss does not officially turn you into a lazy person, but it does make you more scattered and much more vulnerable to quick distractions. Decent sleep, morning light, and some movement are not moral lectures, but practical ways to make the brain less dramatic. A student delays a term paper not because suffering is a hobby, but because the task is huge, the grade is far away, and the start feels painfully fuzzy. An employee postpones an important email not because intelligence suddenly vanished, but because the message carries evaluation risk and offers no fast reward. A person skips the gym not because they secretly hate health, but because too many small barriers stand between the couch and the workout. Even cleaning often collapses not from laziness, but from the feeling that it is an endless black hole of time. In all of these cases, the solution is surprisingly similar: make the first step tiny, make the environment easier, and make progress visible. If we turn all the advice into one working system, it becomes a practical household antidote to procrastination. Choose one important task, not 15, so the brain does not open a full anxiety fair. Make the first step painfully concrete, assign an exact start time or tie it to an event, and remove distractions in advance. Then run a short work block and give yourself a small controlled reward so the brain feels not only effort, but also a pleasant ending. And always leave yourself a bridge for the next round: one note, one open file, or one obvious entry back into the task. The most useful idea here is simple: motivation usually arrives after the start, not before it. So you do not need to defeat yourself heroically every time. Sometimes it is enough to make the entry into the task so easy that the brain has nothing left to argue with. Do not wait for inspiration, do not insult yourself in advance, and do not play the role of Monday hero. Instead, reduce the fog, cut the friction, create a tiny start, and give the brain its first honest win. And write in the comments where your brain usually escapes: the phone, endless preparation, or the magical thought that tomorrow will somehow be different.